Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I am going to give a reading of Sonnets by the American poet Claude McKay. They will all be deriving from this book, his selected poems. I often make the statement that this is your best source for his poetry. I recently acquired his complete poems, a book that I bought 20 years ago after much anticipation, and read through and returned to the bookseller for a full refund because I was so disgusted with the book. I talked all about that in a video that I filmed last night. I will link it in the description box, as well as any other pertinent videos I happen to mention. Excuse me a second. Foot starting to cramp up a little bit. When you're an old person, things like that do occasionally happen. So I suppose this should be complementary to that video, but it follows on a succession of videos pertaining to the sonnet. Recently, I'm guessing 2 weeks ago, I did a video of American sonnets, and that sort of led me into all of this. I'll link that. And then about a week ago, I did a reading of 20 sonnets by George Santayana. He had 4 sonnets included in that American Sonnets reading, and so I read 20 more, and he is an interesting literary figure of America in that he is exactly the sort of person that our present government here in the United States would have locked up, put into a concentration camp, perhaps, or perhaps sent away to a gulag in South America, or since I believe he spoke some Spanish, that would be too kind, to a gulag or a prison somewhere in civil war-torn Sudan. That is what our government today in the United States is like. Santayana came to this country when he was, I don't know, 7 or 8, and he never obtained U.S. citizenship. So that makes him a bad person, that makes him a criminal, that makes him a rapist, etc., etc., according to the eyes of the fascist regime now in power. If George Santayana was so bad a man, goodness only knows what they would say about Claude McKay, who emigrated from Jamaica and became our preeminent sonneteer, at least the preeminent sonneteer of our generation. Well, of his generation, I should say. Our generation, it might well be this generation, Don Patterson, but he is not from the U.S., so he doesn't count. A poet almost equally coterminous with him would be David Novak. That is me. This is my first book of sonnets, but I do not care to make any boasts as far as preeminence. So let us restrict ourselves to the great generation, the greatest generation, the generation of T.S. Eliot. I think McKay is born within 2 years of T.S. Eliot. Eliot was born in St. Louis and moved away to England. McKay was born in Jamaica and moved north to the U.S. And of poets writing, we have Edna St. Vincent Millay, who wrote enough sonnets to get a volume of collected sonnets put together. I don't know how many are in here. A good 150, I would say. Perhaps a little bit more than that. And some of them are very, very good. In this book, we have 44 sonnets, and they are, with the possible exception of a couple of Millay's, they are all greatly superior to hers and greatly superior to the sonnets written by other sonneteers of his generation. Wilfred Owen of England wrote a lot of sonnets, and I just don't know of anybody else who did. Robert Frost wrote a few. His are comparatively crude, let us say, to quote a line from E.E. Cummings. Of course, E.E. Cummings wrote a lot of sonnets, and his are even more than comparatively crude compared to Claude McKay's. I talked about and I've talked about it various times, the biographical note that Max Eastman wrote for Claude. This actually was in the original edition put at the back of the book, and there was an introduction by another writer, and that introduction did not stand the test of time. Eastman's biographical note does, and so it was moved to the front for this reprinting of this edition. As I say, this is the edition to get. There is not a bad poem in this book. The complete poems, except for what's in the selected, most of the poems are kind of bad. As I say, I read a few of them. So let me go on and just read the first bunch of sonnets here. So it's divided, this compilation, into sections that are very nicely done. You've got songs for Jamaica. You've got, what does that say? I can't even read it. Baptism, Americana, different places. And then there's a final one, I think. Amoroso, yeah. So 5 sections. I will be reading sonnets from the first 2 sections, which contain altogether 21 sonnets. So that, I figure, would be a nice pairing with my Santayana reading. And I will just take them as they appear here sequentially. I think this is it. I will start with 2 that are linked together under the title of My Mother. Reg, I don't know if it's Reg or Reg, it's R-E-G. I would guess it that the nickname, it would be short for Reginald, so Reg. My mother. Reg wished me to go with him to the field. I paused because I did not want to go. But in her quiet way, she made me yield, reluctantly, for she was breathing low. Her hand she slowly lifted from her lap, and smiling sadly in the old sweet way, she pointed to the nail where hung my cap. Her eyes said, I shall last another day. But scarcely had we reached the distant place when over the hills we heard a faint bell ringing. A boy came running up with frightened face. We knew the fatal news that he was bringing. I heard him listlessly without a moan, although the only one I loved was gone. The dawn departs, the morning is begun. The trades come whispering from off the seas. The fields of corn are golden in the sun. The dark brown tassels fluttering in the breeze. The bell is sounding, and the children pass. Frog leaping, skipping, shouting, laughing shrill. Down the red road, over the pasture grass, up to the schoolhouse crumbling on the hill. The older folk are at their peaceful toil, some pulling up the weeds, some plucking corn, and others breaking up the sun-baked soil. Float faintly scented breeze at early morn over the earth where mortals sow and reap. Beneath its breast, my mother lies asleep. So you can hear traces of John Keats in there, I think. Of course, if I like something, I always hear traces of John Keats. This one is titled Wild May. Alita mentions in her tender letters, among a chain of quaint and touching things, that you are feeble, weighted down with fetters, and given to strange deeds and mutterings. No longer without trace or thought of fear do you leap to and ride the rebel roan, but have become the victim of grim care with 3 brown beauties to support alone. But nonetheless will you be in my mind, wild May that cantered by the risky ways, with showy headcloth flirting in the wind, from market in the glad December days. Wild May, of whom even other girls could rave, before sex tamed your spirit, made you slave. I haven't read some of these in a long time, so pardon me for stumbling through them. A lot of the poems in the first section are looking back to his childhood in Jamaica. This next one may well be one of the most, I've recorded many of these individually on this channel, and this may well be one of the most popular recordings I've done. I Shall Return. I shall return again. I shall return to laugh and love and watch with wonder eyes. At golden noon the forest fires burn, wafting their blue-black smoke to sapphire skies. I shall return to loiter by the streams that bathe the brown blades of the bending grasses, and realize once more my 1,000 dreams of waters rushing down the mountain passes. I shall return to hear the fiddle and fife of village dances, dear delicious tunes that stir the hidden depths of native life, stray melodies of dim remembered runes. I shall return again, to ease my mind of long, long years of pain. I don't believe he ever did return. Now, the next poems forthcoming are the sonnets for which he is justly famous. These put him on the map, so to speak. Baptism. Into the furnace let me go alone. Stay you without in terror of the heat. I will go naked in, for thus 'tis sweet, into the weird depths of the hottest zone. I will not quiver in the frailest bone. You will not note a flicker of defeat. My heart shall tremble not its fate to meet. My mouth give utterance to any moan. The yawning oven spits forth fiery spears. Red aspish tongues shout wordlessly my name. Desire destroys, consumes my mortal fears, transforming me into a shape of flame. I will come out, back to your world of tears, a stronger soul within a finer frame. If we must die. This is from Red Summer of 1919. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. I should say, in contrast with our present time, we have the foul Trump regime attempting to inflict full-scale fascism upon us. Violence is being enacted and will increasingly be enacted upon us. And yet, while our resistance is building, the response has not been as strong as it could be. And we who favor democracy, who favor rights such as due process rights, who favor the tripartite division into co-equal branches of government, we are not far outnumbered by any mean. We outnumber the fascists. Every so often, one finds online somebody talking about one of the photos of some white folks posing with lynching victims. And I don't think in this case a photo is worth 1,000 words. In this case, and the photo would not, I think, surprise me or move me so much because I have known this poem for a very long time, titled The Lynching. His spirit in smoke ascended to high heaven. His father, by the cruelest way of pain, had bidden him to his bosom once again. The awful sin remained still unforgiven. All night a bright and solitary star, perchance the one that ever guided him, yet gave him up at last to fate's wild whim, hung pitifully o'er the swinging char. Day dawned, and soon the mixed crowds came to view, the ghastly body swaying in the sun. The women thronged to look, but never a one showed sorrow in her eyes of steely blue. And little lads, lynchers that were to be, danced round the dreaded thing in fiendish glee. I had a comment on one or more of the poems that I read yesterday, as somebody said, well, not everybody, not every white person was racist. I think when we write poetry, sometimes we have to resort to generalizations. McKay writes, and little lads, lynchers that were to be, danced round the dreadful thing in fiendish glee. He doesn't need to specify that there were also some lads maybe that didn't show up that day, and maybe some of those lads did not become lynchers in the course of time. He is describing a moment, and it is a subjective experience. Sorry about this. I will continue. To the white fiends. Think you I am not fiend and savage too? Think you I could not arm me with a gun and shoot down 10 of you for every one of my black brothers murdered, burnt by you? Be not deceived. For every deed you do, I could outmatch. Am I not Afric's son, black of that black land where black deeds are done? But the Almighty from the darkness drew my soul and said, even thou shalt be a light a while to burn on the benighted earth. Thy dusky face I set among the white, for thee to prove thyself of higher worth. Before the world is swallowed up in night, to show thy little lamp, go forth, go forth. That is the poem I mentioned, quoting from in my first book of poems, Embodiment and Release. In bondage. I would be wandering in distant fields where man and bird and beast lives leisurely. And the old earth is kind and ever yields her goodly gifts to all her children free. Where life is fairer, lighter, less demanding, and boys and girls have time and space for play before they come to years of understanding. Somewhere I would be singing far away. For life is greater than the 1,000 wars men wage for it in their insatiate lust, and will remain like the eternal stars when all that shines today is drift and dust. But I am bound with you in your mean graves, O black men, simple slaves of ruthless slaves. Africa. The sun sought thy dim bed and brought forth light. The sciences were sucklings at thy breast. When all the world was young in pregnant night, thy slaves toiled at thy monumental best. Thou ancient treasure land, thou modern prize, new peoples marvel at thy pyramids. The years roll on, thy sphinx of riddle eyes watches the mad world with immobile lids. The Hebrews humbled them at Pharaoh's name, cradle of power, yet all things were in vain. Honor and glory, arrogance and fame, they went, the darkness swallowed thee again. Thou art the harlot, now thy time is done, of all the mighty nations of the sun. Outcast. For the dim regions whence my fathers came, my spirit, bondaged by the body, longs. Words felt but never heard, my lips would frame, my soul would sing forgotten jungle songs. I would go back to darkness and to peace, but the great Western world holds me in fee, and I may never hope for full release, while to its alien gods I bend my knee. Something in me is lost, forever lost. Some vital thing has gone out of my heart, and I must walk the way of life a ghost, among the sons of earth, a thing apart. For I was born far from my native clime, under the white man's menace, out of time. I should say that if you cannot feel the universality of that sentiment, you are probably not in touch with yourself. Enslaved. Oh, when I think of my long-suffering race, for weary centuries, despised, oppressed, enslaved and lynched, denied a human place in the great lifeline of the Christian West, and in the black land disinherited, robbed in the ancient country of its birth, my heart grows sick with hate, becomes as lead, for this my race that has no home on earth. Then from the dark depth of my soul I cry to the avenging angel to consume the white man's world of wonders utterly. Let it be swallowed up in earth's vast womb, or upward roll as sacrificial smoke to liberate my people from its yoke. Of course, America is the home to a segment of his long-suffering race, more of a home than to many other people who have more lately come to these shores. Look within. Lord, let me not be silent while we fight in Europe Germans, Asia Japanese, for setting up a fascist way of might, while 15 million Negroes on their knees pray for salvation from the fascist yoke of these United States. Remove the beam, nearly 2,000 years since Jesus spoke, from your own eyes before the mote you deem it proper from your neighbors to extract. We bathe our lies in vapors of sweet myrrh, and close our eyes not to perceive the fact. But Jesus said, you whited sepulchre, pretending to be uncorrupt of sin, while worm-infested, rotten through within. That is most clearly speaking to our Christian nationalists of today, is it not? And Claude will outlast Christian nationalism. Like a strong tree. Like a strong tree that in the virgin earth sends far its roots through rock and loam and clay, and proudly thrives in rain or time of dearth, when dry waves scare the rain-come sprites away. Like a strong tree that reaches down deep, deep, for sunken water, fluid underground, where the great ringed unsightly blind worms creep, and queer things of the nether world abound. So would I live in rich imperial growth, touching the surface and the depth of things, instinctively responsive unto both, tasting the sweets of being, fearing no stings, sensing the subtle spell of changing forms, like a strong tree against 1,000 storms. You can draw strength from that. Robert Frost has nothing on that. Truth. Lord, shall I find it in thy holy church? Or must I give it up as something dead, forever lost, no matter where I search, like dinosaurs within their ancient bed? I found it not in years of unbelief, in science stirring life like budding trees, in revolution like a dazzling thief. Oh, shall I find it on my bended knees? But what is truth? So Pilate asked thee, Lord, so long ago when thou wert manifest as the eternal and incarnate Word, chosen of God and by him singly blessed. In this vast world of lies and hate and greed, upon my knees, O Lord, for truth I plead. Let me just take a pause. I brought out Paul Carroll because still thinking about that comment. I brought him out, now I don't see him. Oh, here he is. My teacher, Paul Carroll. He was a poet of Chicago. He embodied Chicago. And he one time I shouldn't be drinking bubbly water because it causes me to burp. There was a colleague of his, another teacher, and he said, at the time, a real popular movie was called Fame, and it starred Irene Cara, C.A.R.A., Cara, I don't know. And the theme song of the movie was, I'm Gonna Live Forever. And a colleague of his said, you know, and kids liked that kind of stuff. Students were fans of this popular movie. And his pompous and erudite literary colleagues said to him, how can they go so gaga over that? Not the words, of course. They're singing, I'm gonna live forever. That is so stupid. That is wrong. That is false. And Paul said to me, he said, you know, this asshole, he doesn't get it. He said, and he would make a gesture or say something. and he would use some foul language, and he would say, that's the way it feels. And he's right. That is how it feels. I'm going to live forever. And talking about whatever the poem or the line was that bothered my viewer. Poems present a subjective reality. As a guy I worked with once, he asked me how I was, and I gave him a full answer. I was not doing so well. He said, "This is not a court of law." Or as Moses Finley has written, we have to generalize. I have his essay in The Use and Abuse of History, Generalizations in Ancient History, and he said, any sentence that you make with the word Greek in it is going to have a generalization of some sort. It's going to be false. It is not true. Any sentence you use employing the word Greek, you can't avoid that. And yet, if we didn't generalize, we wouldn't say anything worthwhile. He said, if we didn't generalize, then all we would be saying is Alcibiades or Alcibiades went and did such and such. Tiger. So I don't think it was incumbent upon Claude to be any less forthright in his idiom. Tiger. The white man is a tiger at my throat, drinking my blood as my life ebbs away, and muttering that his terrible striped coat is freedom's and portends the light of day. O white man, you may suck up all my blood and throw my carcass into potter's field, but never will I say with you that mud is bread for Negroes. Never will I yield. Europe and Africa and Asia wait the touted New Deal of the New World's hand. New systems will be built on race and hate. The eagle and the dollar will command. O Lord, my body and my heart too break. The tiger in his strength his thirst must slake. The wise men of the East. Oh, one was black of the wise men of the East, who came with precious gifts to Jesus' birth, a symbol all men equal were at least when Godhead condescended to the earth. The Ethiopian in Jerusalem was human to the preacher of our Lord, who, drawn to him as to a precious gem, bestowed on him the message of the word. Yes, and a great black empire was the first to change itself into a Christian nation, long before Rome its pagan fetters burst and purged itself for Jesus Christ's oblation. From the high place where erstwhile they grew drunk with power, O God, how gutter low have black men sunk. And of course you could say here, till they grew drunk with power, O God, how gutter low have black men sunk. Well, there were some black men there that did not grow drunk with power and did not sink gutter low. I mean, there's no need really to make an exception for every generalization that is made in a poem. I suppose the degree to which one takes exception is the degree to whether a poem is good or not, whether it's effective or not. And I think those poems that I read in the other video, the rambling discussion about Claude McKay were not as good as these, but you would be hard-pressed to take exception to any of these poems. I don't understand quite why this book is not a standard textbook in every school in this nation. As far as poetry, this is it. When I was a kid, we had Robert Frost. My God, that was deadly. In high school, I'm talking about. The pagan isms. Around me roar and crash the pagan isms, to which most of my life was consecrate, betrayed by evil men and torn by schisms, for they were built on nothing more than hate. I cannot live my life without the faith, where new sensations like a fawn will leap, but old enthusiasms like a wraith haunt me awake and haunt me when I sleep. And so to God I go to make my peace, where black nor white can follow to betray. My pent-up heart to him I will release, and surely he will show the perfect way of life, for he will lead me, and no man can violate or circumvent his plan. I've known these poems thoroughly for a good 30 years or more, and they are adamantine strong. I don't know what you are studying. The Negro's Tragedy. It is the Negro's tragedy I feel, which binds me like a heavy iron chain. It is the Negro's wounds I want to heal, because I know the keenness of his pain. Only a thorn-crowned Negro and no white can penetrate into the Negro's ken, or feel the thickness of the shroud of night which hides and buries him from other men. So what I write is urged out of my blood. There is no white man who could write my book, though many think their story should be told of what the Negro people ought to brook. Our statesmen roam the world to set things right. This Negro laughs and prays to God for light. And no, I could not write Claude McKay's book, but he certainly gives me a good window into it. The Negro's Friend. There is no radical the Negro's friend who points some other than the classic road for him to follow, fighting to the end, thinking to ease him of one half his load. What waste of time to cry no segregation when it exists in stark reality, both north and south, throughout this total nation, the state decreed by white authority. Must 15 million blacks be gratified that one of them can enter as a guest a fine white house, the rest of them denied a place of decent sojourn and arrest? Oh, segregation is not the whole sin. The Negroes need salvation from within. As I say, you can't count on a line of poetry from a poem to be the be-all, end-all final word on any topic. This line here, what waste of time to cry no segregation, that's presenting a point of view. We are seeing exactly this same kind of argument repeated on the left all the time. What use is it to say such and such when this is happening? And it comes out, perhaps the answer is more nuanced than that. Perhaps saying and doing equally have their place in the struggle against fascism today, as in his day. But that still does not invalidate the line of poetry at all. So that must have been number 20. And so one more, which will close out the segment of the book. Was it Americana? The poems expressly dealing with the racial situation in America. Some of these obviously went through the years of the Second World War, but the major ones were commenced, I think, in that fateful summer of 1919. I know my soul. I plucked my soul out of its secret place and held it to the mirror of my eye, to see it like a star against the sky, a twitching body quivering in space, a spark of passion shining on my face. And I explored it to determine why this awful key to my infinity conspires to rob me of sweet joy and grace. And if the sign may not be fully read, if I can comprehend but not control, I need not gloom my days with futile dread, because I see a part and not the whole. Contemplating the strange, I'm comforted by this narcotic thought. I know my soul. So that was 21 sonnets by Claude McKay. There will be 23 forthcoming. As I say, every sonnet in this book, I think there are 44 of them total, is flawless. He is the sonneteer preeminent of his day and continuing through to our day, I would argue. Millay did some good ones. Wilfred Owen did some good ones, did some phenomenal ones. I think William Butler Yeats did one really great one. Maybe another one that wasn't so great. E.A. Robinson, I think, did some. The other one that I always confuse with him, what is his name? John Crow Ransom. Both of those guys did decent sonnets, but none of them soared to the heights Parnassian of Claude McKay. Well, that was the jam. Now comes the pill. Because I have a few sonnets extra for the second part of this, I will read you my early sonnets that touched upon Claude McKay, just for the heck of it. There are 3 of them. The sonnet form was relatively new to me, and so these were fairly clumsy. The friendship house they made a home for thee these many years ago in thy decline, last years of illness and of penury, though wanting neither love nor weed nor wine. Decline? No, not decline in spirit ever, though thy sad life we never did support, the opportunity now gone forever. But thou wast wise and had thine own purport. What times were they, and what again are these? America, far from thy native land, embraces thee, fulfills thy prophecies, her gaudy treasures sinking in the sand. To thee, whose verse exceeds the choicest wines, dear Claude McKay, I dedicate these lines. I don't think at the time that I knew quite yet that Claude McKay was the sonneteer preeminent of his generation. I know that now after 30 years. This book came out, if The Soul's Refinement came out in 1996, I would guess that this came out in 1994. I don't think I have any record of when it came out. I mean, when it came out of me. When it was printed is a different matter. It was printed in 2001, I think, or something. But when it was written. Sorry, I get confused when I speak. So that's evidence, I guess, that I have known these poems of Claude McKay for 04-14, 94 to 04, 04 to 14, 14 to 30 plus years. And as I said, they are strong. You are not going to do better. The next 2, I employed the sonnet stanza which Claude McKay invented. I've done a couple of separate videos talking about this sonnet form, and I will find those and put links to them in the description box also. Now, I did not realize, I thought that this was an introduction written by Max Eastman. It was simply a biographical note which they had transposed from the back portion of the book because they cut out the original introduction, which was poorly. So when I referred to an introduction, I didn't realize that I didn't know the whole textual history of the selected volume. My only wish, which I may not attain, years hence when my poems bound and printed are, that I may have an introduction written for them like what Max Eastman wrote for thine. So generous and sweet, so full of care, wherefore the mind was wrung, the pencil bitten, instead of some encomium more fine, sententious in its praise, to pay for pain. This I may never have, because my life lacks all the grace and generosity of thine, dear Claude. In meanness pass my days, each than the last more odious to me, and fever fits no spoken word allays, but plunge me further headlong into strife. It's scarcely recognized. This is me being persnickety. If those were trying to go high, this is going low a little bit. Pardon me. Young poets have that prerogative. It's scarcely recognized that Claude McKay, of all the poets of his generation, except for Wilfred Owen, wrote the best, and he Jamaica-born, iambic line, pentameter of pleasant modulation. While this and that, like Eliot, professed it an outmoded fashion, like some wine not suited for the taste of present day. But so it goes. And look at these successors of Eliot. Their verse is all a mess, no fault of his, all mutually admiring each other's spewage, calling it finesse and poetry and verse, the lot conspiring to keep the lie concealed from their assessors. T.S. Eliot had the misfortune of, he was not an academic, but he had the misfortune of being immediately taken over by the academia and became their purview, became the purview of these bald heads in their ivory towers. Of course, everything I said in that poem 30 plus years ago is true. He did bring, Eliot credited Yeats, particularly his poem Purgatory, with bringing the iambic line into the modern age. But I will certainly accept that. And nobody else has it. But Claude McKay somehow, quite possibly independently of Yeats, sidestepped all the trouble that many of his peers doubtless were having and just brought it along. And I, as coming after him, was one of the beneficiaries, to be sure. And the racist fascists of today would see Claude McKay, were he alive today, they would see him hauled off to a gulag, a torture prison in El Salvador. That is what they would do. And they have taken apart the, the Department of Education. They have scrubbed all of the governmental websites, etc., and they would scrub any poem of Claude McKay's from the curriculum, from the curricula. Is that right? As I have said, he finds his way into most every Library of America edition. Let us hope that Library of America is backed by a strong foundation that Trump cannot take over as he did the Kennedy Center, because we do not need that devastated. I will come back and do the rest of Claude McKay's sonnets. Sonnets were not all he wrote, and so that may well call for a third reading, but sonnets were the major thing he did. As I have said, this is not the book to get unless you want to dive deeply into McKay studies, or perhaps studies of the Harlem Renaissance, history, or something of that sort. But for poetry as poetry, I cannot urge you strongly enough to find this selected edition. This is a Harvest HBJ book. And I have thought I would like to go and get an old hardbound copy of it, but that would contain the introduction, which really, as I say, was poorly. So I will leave off there and continue later. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel. I should say to my friendly commenter, I'm not trying to beat you up in this. I appreciate anybody who comes to my page and makes a comment. It's actually a very thoughtful comment. In fact, why don't I read it to everybody? Sorry. McKay talks about white people as all of them were racist, but that is a stereotyping, as not every white was and is racist, especially nowadays. I am white, not my own choice. We don't choose the skin color we are born with, and never been racist towards anyone. I don't feel like a master of the world. So he is stereotyping white men, saying all white men are like that. Nowadays, it would be actually racist of him to say that about all white people. He should write some white men, not white men. I've discussed that a little bit. If you call someone who is not a racist, then it is more likely he will start to dislike you for calling him racist, and possibly even because of that accusation may start feeling a bit of antipathy towards the accuser, and a bit of anger, which could evoke some racist feelings toward the accuser. So the result is counterproductive. I don't know. I think, I believe my commenter is from England. So that is a very different scenario to anything that we are dealing here. In the United States, I was not taught any of the history at all of my own country, at all. And to the extent that I had history by osmosis, it was along the lines of the lost cause mythology. The lost cause mythology being that the Civil War was fought, but it was all for the good. It was for states' rights, and slavery was not really the crux of it, and slaves were treated real well in the United States, and it was somewhat beneficial to them, and so forth. I mean, that kind of cant. So, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson were not such bad men as you might think somebody who did what they did was. Jefferson selling his own children. Down the river and so forth. But for a white person of my generation, born in 1962, and for others who have come after me, we didn't get any legitimate history, and it required independent investigation. And it has really been the internet age which has brought that about. Otherwise, we had no access at all. The lies were so thick, there was no penetrating them, except with either some sort of an anomalous circumstance or just some strange strange persistence, I guess you would say. And I'm speaking of white people because, of course, everybody else could, to some degree or another, see through these things. You know, when the southern seceding states said that they were seceding because of slavery, they meant it. And in my case, I suppose the little chink in the wall that I got, so to speak, was the poem by Claude McKay. My Norton anthology printed If We Must Die in one of the editions of Norton Anthology. I have two at the time, and the other one did not print it. And I have always been of a curious nature, and fortunately I recognized right off that If We Must Die was a masterful poem. And the story always goes that Winston Churchill read it to the House of Commons. True or not, I don't know. But you can read that poem and not know the race of the author. But you get this book and you will know. And fortunately, my curiosity brought me there. As far as the history of my country, all we ever learned was Columbus, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. My apologies again. You see what it's like here? And I never began even to get a sense of the history. Really, the main book that did it for me was the book From Columbus to Castro. Sorry, for some reason, when I was reading it, I put a book cover on. The history of the Caribbean. I don't know if it's Caribbean or Caribbean. I've heard it both ways. The history of the Caribbean. And this book, for the first time in my life, I realized, oh, what happened in the United States was sort of the tail end of a process, a big process. And this book really, I mean, it may well have been superseded by more current histories. I'm just trying to find and Eric Williams was from where? Trinidad, Tobago, I think. I think after authoring, I think he went into politics. But of course, his great classic is Capitalism and Slavery, which was the first thing I read by him. And it's a standard work. I don't think that it has been superseded. I don't think that it can be leapfrogged to a more current volume. I think it is a necessary basis to understanding the American slavery system. And just to bring out my third book in the trilogy was the C.L.R. James, the story of the revolt in Haiti. I was turned on to this via M.I. Finley. This is the trio of books, and I am not speaking to my British commenter in this. I'm speaking wholly to possibly any young American viewer who wants to get a better grasp of the history. I highly recommend these books. They may be outdated, but they're pretty pretty on target, I think. I sometimes think we white people are like the character in or the person in attendance of Moliere's audience for the play The Miser, and he talks about, he says, in this audience there is a person such and such and such, and inevitably some guy in the audience would get up and say, "Oh, I don't like how he's talking about me. That's not true at all. I'm not that stingy bastard," and storm out of the theater. Well, of course, Moliere was not talking about him. And I think sometimes we are a bit sensitive. Anyhow, this went on further than it needed to as well. Thank you for stopping by my channel.